Imagine being in your own home, but feeling like you don't belong. When my mother-in-law called me a guest in my husband's house, something inside me shifted. Over a tense dinner, she said, "You're nothing without us." That was the breaking point. Discover how, quietly and determinedly, I took control of my life and, without fighting, did something that would change everything. I put my name on the deed to the house. When I met Tom, I thought he was the man for me. He was everything I wanted: kind, thoughtful, funny, and our connection seemed immediate. As expected, everything about the beginning of our relationship was perfect. The wedding happened quickly, but everything felt right, you know? Those things everyone dreams of: candlelit dinners, trips, plans for the future. Life seemed to be unfolding just the way I'd always dreamed. In the first few months, my mother-in-law seemed like the sweetest, most welcoming person. She was always around, bringing us home-cooked meals, asking how we were, and even helping with little things around the house. She seemed like a positive presence, a support for our relationship. I was even touched by how much she wanted everything to be perfect for Tom. She'd say, "I just want the best for him, you know? I want him to be happy, for you to make him happy." I thought it was adorable. I believed every mother cared this much about her child, about his happiness. And I understood that. I respected her love for Tom. In those first few weeks, we actually got along well. She treated me with affection, and I felt like, somehow, we were forming a close-knit family. I saw Tom with such affection for her, and I, too, began to feel like part of that family. Everything seemed to be in harmony. But soon, I began to notice something that bothered me. Little comments here and there, as if she really were the owner of the house, and I was just there to visit every now and then. At first, I thought it was all in my head, that I was overreacting. Who doesn't have a somewhat protective mother-in-law, right? But soon I realized her suggestions were becoming more frequent, more incisive. She'd come over to our house and make a point of giving us tips on how to organize things. "You should move the table. My son likes it better this way." Or she'd start offering her opinion on our decisions. "I know you want to do it this way, but I think it would be better this way for Tom." And Tom? He'd always say, "She just wants everything to be perfect. You know how she is, don't worry." I felt bad disagreeing with him, thinking this was starting to cross a line. But how could I, in the midst of our harmonious marriage, question his mother? I felt, somehow, indebted for not being able to accept all of this without question. Over time, things started to change, and I didn't know how to react. At first, it seemed like my mother-in-law was just trying to help, lending a hand here and there, like any loving mother would. But it soon became clear that she wasn't just helping, she was taking control. And what's worse, Tom, instead of supporting me, seemed to validate her every move. She started showing up at home unannounced, which at first I thought was a common mistake made by a mother missing her son. But then the visits became more and more frequent. It was almost as if she felt entitled to come and go as she pleased. Sometimes she'd even arrive before us, with the door already open, as if she already had a right to be there. When I talked about it with Tom, he'd say, "She just worries, you know. She likes to make sure we're okay." But deep down, I knew something was wrong. I no longer felt comfortable. And it didn't stop there. She started offering advice on absolutely everything. How we spent money, how we should save, even how we arranged our furniture. I remember one day when she came into the living room and started rearranging our decor, without asking if I agreed. "That sofa is too close to the window," she commented, moving the piece of furniture as if she were the owner of the house. I was frozen, watching the scene, unsure how to react. Tom? He didn't even notice what was happening. "Oh, she just likes to make sure everything is perfect for us," he said with a smile, as if it were normal. That feeling of discomfort spread, and I found myself constantly inundated with opinions, advice, and even criticism disguised as help. I began to question whether I still had any control over my own life. I knew I needed to set boundaries, but how could I do so without seeming ungrateful or cruel? How could I challenge the actions of a woman who had always treated me with such affection, yet at the same time seemed to be pushing me out of my own home? And worst of all, One day she walked into our room without knocking. I was getting ready, and she simply walked in, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. That was the last straw. I was overcome by a silent rage, a frustration I had never felt before. Our space was being invaded, and there was no going back. I'll never forget that dinner. It was late at night, the table was set, and we were all seated, me, Tom, my mother-in-law, and the rest of his family. It was one of those nights where everyone seemed happy and relaxed, but I felt different. The discomfort had settled in like a shadow, and I could barely hide it. My mind was busy remembering the moments before, the invasions of our space, the criticisms disguised as suggestions. I wanted to simply enjoy the evening, but I knew the tension was there, ready to explode. In the middle of the conversation, my mother-in-law made a comment that I initially tried to ignore, but I soon realized she was playing a much nastier game. She looked at me and, with a subtle smile, said, "You should be grateful my son lets you live here. You're just a guest in his house." Time seemed to stand still. I froze. All the air was knocked out of the room, and I couldn't breathe properly. Tom was beside me, and in that moment I thought he would react, that he would defend me, that he would say something comforting, but no. He did nothing. That sentence, spoken aloud, in front of the entire family, was like a sharp blade cutting through my dignity. The worst of all? The silence that followed. The room was shocked. No one dared say a word. My mother-in-law seemed satisfied with her provocation, as if she'd delivered a masterstroke. But me? I was broken inside. I felt like I was there, but at the same time, I wasn't. As if everything I'd achieved, the marriage, the house, the relationship with Tom, had been devalued by a single sentence. I wanted to scream. I wanted to put her in her place. But what would I do? What could I say, with everyone watching? Tom was right next to me, and he did nothing. And his inaction tore me apart even more. What I felt in that moment wasn't just humiliation. It was the feeling of being disrespected, of being treated like an outsider, in the house that should have been mine too. Amidst the silence, I forced a smile and said something to break the tension, but inside, my pain was boiling over. What she'd just said wasn't just an insult. It was a cruel reminder that, even though I was married to her son, I would never be really part of this family, at least not the way she saw it. I was there, but to her, I was still a guest. And who was the real owner of this house? Not me. After dinner, I couldn't get that phrase out of my head. You're just a guest in his house. Those words kept echoing in my mind, and the more I thought about it, the more lost I felt. I was devastated, not just by what she said, but by the way Tom did nothing to defend me. The man I loved, the man I married, was silent. And in that silence, everything changed. I would lock myself in my room for hours, trying to understand what had happened. I knew I couldn't go on like this any longer, living in the shadow of my mother-in-law's decisions. She had an absurd amount of control over everything, and I felt like a bystander, voiceless, without a place. What shocked me most was the fact that Tom didn't seem to realize how much this was affecting me. Or maybe he didn't care. I didn't know what to think anymore. I started thinking about everything that had already happened, the small humiliations, the criticism disguised as concern, the lack of respect for my feelings, the lack of boundaries. And her words at dinner were just the thing. It was no longer about her being a loving mother. It was clear that it was about her feeling like she owned the house. And worst of all, Tom seemed to accept this. That's when I called my friend Laura and started venting. She listened attentively, without interrupting, until she asked me a simple question that changed everything. If it's your home too, why don't you make it official? If you have the right, do it. It's your home too. I had never thought of it that way. I felt like I needed something more, something that would prove I had control over my own life. Not just over my marriage, but also over the space we lived in. Laura told me, "You're sacrificing yourself to keep up appearances, but deep down, you're denying yourself. If the house is yours too, the deed should be yours too." It was like a light bulb went off in my head. She was right. I needed to take action. Not aggressive or impulsive action. I didn't need to yell or confront. I just needed to do what was right. I needed to do it quietly, without anyone knowing. I wasn't going to wait any longer for a change that would never come. I had to act and act intelligently. At that moment, I decided I was going to take control of my life. I was no longer a guest in Tom's house. I had the right to be a part of it, officially, and without having to ask anyone's permission. I was going to put my name on the deed, quietly, without causing any kind of confrontation. It was a subtle but crucial change, and it was what I needed to regain my dignity. I knew that to change something, I needed to act calmly and intelligently. It wouldn't be a visible or dramatic change. I didn't want to fight with anyone. I just wanted to know where my space really was, my right in our home. So, I started investigating quietly, without Tom or my mother-in-law knowing what I was planning. I remember one day after work, walking into Tom's office while he was at work. I was nervous, but I had to do it. I grabbed all the house documents I could find, and there it was. The deed. I looked at it closely, and what I saw surprised me. His name was there, but not mine. I already knew Tom had greater control over the finances and the property, but this was a shock. The house I spent most of my time in, where we built memories and made plans for the future, was still 100% tied to him. I sat in that office chair, staring at the paper. The feeling of helplessness and humiliation grew with each passing second. How could I have let this happen? It's not like I was a stranger, but that's how I felt at that moment. The house was mine too, but the paper said otherwise. I needed to change that. I couldn't let my mother-in-law and even Tom continue to have so much control over the decisions, as if I were a mere spectator in my own life. After finding the deed, I knew the next step would be to seek legal help. I didn't want to just impulsively change the situation without knowing what I was doing. I wanted to be strategic, do everything legally and calmly. I wasn't going to confront anyone yet. All I needed was to secure my place in what I'd built, too. And that's how I made an appointment with a lawyer, without anyone knowing. The consultation with the lawyer was a turning point. I knew this would be the decisive moment. I walked into the office, my heart beating faster than I'd like to admit. But at the same time, there was a strange sense of relief. Now, things were going in the right direction. The first thing the lawyer did was reassure me, saying that, yes, I had rights. The house, in theory, should be mine too, since we were married and contributed equally to its upkeep, but the fact that it wasn't formalized in the deed was something I needed to fix to ensure my financial and legal security. He explained the entire process. You need to file a request to have your name added to the deed, he said. It's simple, but it needs to be done legally. The first thing I would recommend is that you talk calmly with your husband about this. He may think it's just a precaution, something simple, but this will ensure your safety in case of any unforeseen circumstances. I knew I had to take it easy, but the idea of doing this without arguments or confrontations seemed like the best option. I no longer wanted that feeling of being controlled. What impressed me most was that the lawyer explained that this wasn't just a detail on paper. It was about establishing a solid foundation of equality and respect. And even if Tom didn't realize it now, he would one day. What I was doing wasn't just for me, but also for our future, for our safety, for our relationship. I no longer wanted to be treated like a visitor in my own life. I was determined. The lawyer told me the process would be quick, as long as we both signed the papers. I didn't want to make any more excuses. It was time to make the change, to ensure that my place, my right, was officially recognized. From that moment on, the deeds of the house I helped build, would reflect the true partnership that was our marriage. I would no longer need to hide, to feel invisible. I was taking control of my story. If you identified with this story or have been through something similar, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts and how you would handle this situation. Don't forget to like this video, share it with anyone you think needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel for more moving stories like this. Follow our empowerment journey and transform your own story. Let's go together towards taking control of our lives and happiness. See you in the next video.